literally no offense to anything. They're very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of 7 dwarves living in a cave. What the are you doing, man?
Rachel Zegler, once heralded as a promising new face in Hollywood, has recently found herself engulfed in controversy, her meteoric rise clouded by what many are now calling the Snow White disaster. Initially anticipated as a bold reimagining of the classic tale, the live-action adaptation quickly unraveled into a storm of backlash. From scathing early reviews and abysmal test screenings to troubling behind-the-scenes reports, the project became a lightning rod for criticism. The film's promotional efforts did little to stem the tide, with public sentiment turning sharply against both the creative direction and its leading star.
This would have been a lot better if they, had a strong male along with her, a prince, if it wasn't about socialism, if they didn't remove the dwarves, if they had real dwarves.
But listen to this. In a surprising twist, new rumors have emerged suggesting that Zegler may be placing part of the blame for the film's unraveling on Peter Dinklage. According to insiders, tensions flared after Dinklage publicly criticized the project's depiction of the 7 dwarves, calling it a backward portrayal that perpetuated harmful stereotypes. His comments reportedly triggered a major shift in the production's approach, forcing rewrites, reshoots, and last-minute changes that some say derailed the film's original vision.
They're remaking the movie, they just got rid of the dwarves. Okay,
but what do they call them?
Why would they get rid of the dwarves, though?
Magical creatures.
But they have one token dwarf amongst these magical creatures.
This new angle has reignited public debate and injected fresh drama into an already chaotic narrative. Suddenly, what once appeared to be a simple case of a film gone wrong is now being viewed through a lens of internal conflict and industry politics. How did it all come to this? What exact role did Peter Dinklage play behind the scenes? And why is Rachel Zegler, once at the center of admiration, now seemingly pointing fingers in his direction?
You actually just went backwards. You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it, the disability, like we're a disability group. You just erase that whole image.
In the months leading up to the film's release, the production became a lightning rod for controversy, with one headline-grabbing issue after another casting a shadow over what was supposed to be a major cinematic event. Disney had boldly announced its intention to reimagine Snow White for a modern audience, promising to update the classic 1937 animated film by stripping away elements it deemed outdated or problematic. The studio positioned the project as a progressive step forward, an attempt to blend nostalgia with contemporary values.
Argument should have been from Peter Dinklage. There's power of being on TV, there's power of television, and to put 7 people with dwarfism on camera in a major Disney movie, there's still power there.
At the center of this reimagining was Rachel Zegler, cast in the titular role. Her selection drew immediate attention and sparked a wide spectrum of reactions. While many applauded the move as a welcome step toward greater diversity and inclusivity in Hollywood, others were more skeptical. Critics questioned whether Disney's changes would go too far, altering the essence of a cherished fairy tale in the name of modern sensibilities. The casting decision became a flashpoint in a larger cultural conversation about authenticity, representation, and the delicate balance between innovation and preservation.
If the story is offensive, change the story, don't change the characters.
But that's not all. The situation escalated when acclaimed actor Peter Dinklage publicly criticized the film's portrayal of the 7 dwarves. In an interview, Dinklage expressed concern that revisiting the characters without rethinking their depiction risked reinforcing outdated and offensive stereotypes. His remarks quickly went viral, sparking intense debate within the industry and among fans. Many praised Dinklage for speaking out, agreeing that Hollywood needed to tread carefully when portraying historically marginalized groups. Others felt his comments misunderstood the project's intentions.
Peter Dinklage destroyed Disney, and it could end up costing the company over $100 million.
Dinklage's intervention reportedly sent shockwaves through Disney's executive ranks. Already navigating a minefield of public scrutiny, the studio suddenly found itself in a bind, torn between honoring the legacy of a beloved story and avoiding the perpetuation of harmful tropes. The result? A flurry of behind-the-scenes changes, rumored reshoots, and creative rewrites that only added to the film's growing instability. What was once envisioned as a fresh, empowering update began to look more like a production in crisis, with each new development further muddying the waters.
Disney has cast Rachel Zegler to play Snow White, which caused a lot of controversy because Zegler is Hispanic and the character is traditionally German.
As development trudged forward, troubling signs continued to mount. Rumors of extensive script rewrites began to circulate, fueling speculation that the production was in a state of quiet chaos. Insiders claimed that the creative team was scrambling to respond to the backlash, with the storyline in constant flux. At the center of the storm was the depiction of the dwarfs, once a whimsical hallmark of the original film, now a lightning rod for controversy. The studio, reportedly rattled by Peter Dinklage's outspoken criticism, entered damage control mode.
That controversy is being compared to Halle Bailey's Little Mermaid, which did lose $50 million, making only $555 million in a budget of $250 million.
The reason this is happening? According to those close to the project, Dinklage's remarks triggered a full-blown reassessment of the film's direction. What began as a simple modernization effort quickly ballooned into a crisis of identity for the movie. Writers and producers were allegedly tasked with rewriting entire sequences, attempting to reconcile the need for sensitivity with the desire to preserve the story's magical roots. Rachel Zegler, meanwhile, found herself in an increasingly difficult position, trying to navigate a role that seemed to be evolving by the week. Sources say she was left frustrated by the lack of clarity, as character motivations shifted and scenes were rewritten on the fly.
Peter Dinklage comes into this as when Rachel Zegler was cast, he laughed at Disney saying it's fake progressivism. The reason being that Peter Dinklage, who does have achondroplasia, finds the depiction of the Seven Dwarfs very offensive.
By the time production neared completion, the effects of the turmoil were becoming increasingly visible. Reports began to surface of a film plagued by disjointed editing, uneven pacing, and a storyline that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Internal test screenings delivered lukewarm results at best. Viewers described the film as tonally inconsistent, with some scenes feeling natural and others awkwardly shoehorned in to deliver overtly modern messages. What was intended as a fresh take on a beloved classic was now being criticized for feeling heavy-handed and inauthentic.
Peter Dinklage said that Disney casting Rachel Zegler is their way to feel good about themselves while ignoring a much bigger problem.
Behind the scenes, tensions reportedly ran high. Key members of the creative team were said to be locked in disagreement, some passionately advocating for a traditional retelling true to the spirit of the original, while others pushed for bold, sweeping changes to reflect contemporary values. The result was a film that, according to early viewers, struggled to find its voice, caught between honoring a timeless fairy tale and reinventing it for a new generation, but succeeding at neither.
Peter Dinklage was criticized by some actors with similar conditions, like Dylan Postol said Peter Dinklage was being selfish and that community needs more work.
As the controversy deepened, Rachel Zegler's name became inescapable. She was, after all, the face of the project. With each new development, whether related to casting, script changes, or public backlash, the spotlight zeroed in on her. What should have been a career-defining role quickly turned into a PR minefield. Every piece of praise or criticism seemed to funnel directly toward Zegler, making her the unofficial spokesperson for a film spiraling out of control.
There's now an effort in Hollywood to not cast little people and instead do things like cast Hugh Grant as an Oompa Loompa.
Behind the scenes, whispers grew louder. Online speculation suggested that Zegler herself was growing increasingly frustrated with the direction of the project. Some rumors claimed she was lashing out at those around her, a reaction to the chaos unfolding both on and off set. Others painted a different picture of a young actress thrust into damage control mode, attempting to protect her public image while navigating a production plagued by instability and shifting narratives.
Rachel Zegler is supposed to play Snow White. She's Latina. It says, literally no offense to anyone, but I was a little taken aback that they were very proud to cast a Latina actress as Snow White, but you're still telling the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
It gets crazier. As if the situation weren't already volatile, unverified reports began to circulate about a possible legal issue involving Zegler, stemming from an alleged confrontation on set. Though no official statements were made and no concrete evidence surfaced, the rumor mill kicked into overdrive. The speculation, fueled by gossip blogs and social media, added another layer of scandal to a film already drowning in controversy. Whether true or not, these stories further eroded public confidence in the project and added to the perception that the production was unraveling behind closed doors.
Take a step back and look at what you're doing there. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but then you're still making that backwards story about seven dwarves living in a cave together. What the fuck are you doing, man? Have I done nothing to advance the cause from my soapbox? I guess I'm not loud enough.
In a last-ditch effort to salvage the film's image, Disney tried to pivot. Marketing angles were adjusted, press appearances became more calculated, and statements were issued to reassure fans that the final product would honor the legacy of Snow White. But every move seemed to backfire. Critics accused the studio of pandering, while fans lamented the loss of the story's original charm. The harder Disney tried to steer the narrative, the more it seemed to slip from their control.
I mean, there's the easy joke of, well, we didn't see you on the soapbox, Peter.
It's true.
But
by the time the film limped toward its theatrical release date, it was already buried under a mountain of bad press, fan skepticism, and internal drama. What was once pitched as a bold reimagining of a beloved classic had become a cautionary tale, one where creative ambition, public scrutiny, and behind-the-scenes conflict collided in spectacular fashion.
It's this weird thing where he's saying,
like, oh, it's bad that we're still doing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, so he doesn't necessarily want that. But as little people actors, it's like, well, we kind of want to work. We kind of want...
Throughout this turbulent period, Peter Dinklage's initial comments lingered like a shadow over the entire production. While he had moved on publicly, his critique continued to echo in the background, subtly shaping how the film was perceived by audiences and industry insiders alike. For some, Dinklage was a necessary voice, someone who bravely called out a billion-dollar studio for potentially falling back on outdated tropes. Supporters argued that his intervention was a wake-up call, pushing Disney to uphold higher standards of inclusivity and modern storytelling.
That part, and if that's what's available, then that's what we'd like to do. But at the same time, I get what he's saying, because, yeah, people are like, well, was it that bad? I go, yeah, because at the time, dwarves really didn't have any representation.
But others saw it differently. As the film continued to unravel, critics began to question whether Dinklage's remarks had inadvertently set off a chain reaction of overcorrections. Some insiders claimed that his public criticism forced the studio into a corner, triggering hasty rewrites and creative pivots that ultimately fractured the film's narrative. What was meant to be a thoughtful modernization soon began to feel like a patchwork of ideas, each one designed to appease a different audience, but none fully realized.
Because right now there's more dwarves on this podcast than there are in the new Snow White movie. And that's probably due to Peter Dinklage.
Yep.
Rachel Zegler, meanwhile, remained at the center of the storm. As the film's leading face, she bore the brunt of the backlash. Detractors accused her of being out of her depth, suggesting she lacked the star power or experience to carry such a high-stakes project. Others argued she hadn't done enough to ground the film or guide it through its messy reinvention. Fair or not, the criticism stuck. Online discourse grew increasingly harsh, and Zegler became a lightning rod for frustrations that, in truth, stemmed from much broader issues within the production.
Or can we just say midgie? Okay. Midget, dwarf, they're out of work. They're replaced by CGI things. Yes. Like, this is just a perfect example. That. When there's
thing 12.
There's no guiding principle, just progress for the sake of progress, and you're just trying to weave around a fence after a...
Snow White disaster became the phrase that encapsulated it all. It wasn't just about a film that failed to meet expectations, it was a symbol of what happens when a studio's ambition collides with public scrutiny, creative uncertainty, and unresolved cultural tensions. From the negative press to the lackluster test screenings, from internal conflicts to external controversies, the project became less about reimagining a fairy tale and more about surviving a nightmare of its own making.
And someone goes like, hey, Seven Dwarfs is offensive to midgets. You're like, oh, okay, so let's just not employ any of them.
Yes. Peter Dinklage.
As the release date loomed, media coverage reached a fever pitch. Headlines across entertainment outlets painted a grim picture. Disney's new Snow White was doomed, fractured by internal tension, and marred by clumsy tampering. The film, once positioned as a flagship reimagining of a timeless classic, had become synonymous with controversy. Public confidence had eroded, and every move by the cast or studio only seemed to deepen the skepticism.
With Snow White, let's go through this, right? There's no prince. Woman doesn't need a prince.
Oh, Lord.
Really? Okay, good luck back then.
Rachel Zegler, already under intense scrutiny, found herself navigating a minefield of public perception. Every red carpet appearance, interview quote, or social media post was dissected by fans and critics alike, all searching for signs. Was she subtly acknowledging the backlash? Was she defending the film? Was she distancing herself from it altogether? The pressure was palpable, and each ambiguous gesture only fueled further speculation.
She doesn't need a prince to save her, and not surrounded by 7 weird people. Oh, okay, just CGI fictional goblins, I guess.
But it gets crazier. As fans and industry watchers debated the film's fate, the online conversation took a surprising turn. Rumors began to swirl that Disney, fully aware of the negative buzz, was already preparing to abandon ship. Whispers suggested the studio might be quietly developing a second Snow White adaptation, one that would sideline the troubled version entirely. This hypothetical reboot, according to online chatter, would feature a new director, a fresh creative vision, and a cast untarnished by controversy.
And I get it, there's a difference between spoiling and whatever, but to go out and badmouth everybody and talk smack about, older movies in the same franchise, the canon story, I guess?
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. I feel like they would have had better control over that.
Leading the fan casting frenzy was none other than Jenna Ortega. Her name began trending on social media as the public imagined what the film might look like with an actress known for her nuanced performances and strong screen presence. Many argued that Ortega could bring a grounded, compelling take to the role, especially if paired with a script that embraced the original's emotional core without overcorrecting into awkward modern messaging. The idea of a Rito gained surprising traction attraction, some fans saw it as a chance for Disney to course correct, while others viewed it as an admission of failure. But one thing was clear: the original live-action Snow White, once a symbol of Disney's evolving storytelling, had become a cautionary tale of how good intentions, mishandled execution, and public pressure can derail even the most iconic of fairy tales. As the dust continued to swirl around Snow White, new rumors emerged that added yet another layer to the already tangled narrative. Unverified insider claims suggested that Rachel Zegler, behind closed doors, privately placed a significant portion of the blame on Peter Dinklage. According to these sources, she allegedly believed that his early public criticism, centered on how the film might portray the Seven Dwarfs, was the spark that set off a chain reaction of rewrites, tonal shifts, and ultimately, the film's unraveling. Zegler was said to have confided that the production took a sharp turn after Dinklage's remarks went viral. In her view, the studio's response, marked by a rush to avoid further controversy, led to drastic changes in the script and character dynamics. These sudden pivots she allegedly felt left her performance disjointed and inconsistent, as her role evolved mid-shoot to accommodate new messaging and altered story beats. For an actress still early in her career trying to anchor a high-profile, constantly shifting production, the situation may have felt like an impossible task. But listen to this. While Zegler's supposed frustration sparked sympathy in some circles, not everyone was convinced Dinklage bore the brunt of the blame. Supporters in Zegler's corner argued that her reaction was understandable. To them, the dwarf controversy had ballooned into something far larger, a cultural flashpoint that unfairly redirected criticism toward the entire film before it even had a chance to speak for itself. They contended that the negative spotlight, once fixed, never wavered, and Zegler became an easy target for a project already drowning in bad press. On the other hand, critics pushed back hard against the idea that Dinklage's comments were the root cause of the disaster. They pointed to a laundry list of issues that had nothing to do with the dwarfs: abrupt tonal shifts, a script that leaned heavily into modern messaging at the expense of narrative cohesion, and the loss of the original film's whimsical charm. For these detractors, Dinklage may have lit the match, but the fire was fueled by a series of missteps that reflected deeper creative confusion. In their view, the film's failure was a culmination of competing visions, reactive decisions, making, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what audiences loved about the original Snow White. Ultimately, whether or not Zegler truly blamed Dinklage, the conversation itself underscored just how fractured the production had become. What should have been a unifying, celebratory update of a beloved fairy tale instead evolved into a cautionary tale, one where conflicting agendas, public pressure, and unchecked controversy collided at full force, leaving everyone involved scrambling to make sense of what went wrong. When Snow White finally hit theaters, it did so under a dark cloud of controversy and anticipation, but not the kind Disney had hoped for. The film arrived weighed down by months of negative press, behind-the-scenes drama, and sky-high expectations warped by public scrutiny. Unfortunately, the final product did little to change the narrative. Reviews ranged from lukewarm to outright scathing, echoing the same concerns that had surfaced during early test screenings. Critics and audiences alike pointed to a fractured story that couldn't seem to decide what it wanted to be: an earnest homage to the 1937 classic or a bold, progressive reinvention. In trying to be both, it succeeded at neither. The film's modernization efforts clashed awkwardly with its nods to nostalgia. Key plot points were reworked to reflect contemporary values, but these changes often felt forced rather than organic, creating tonal whiplash. Scenes that aimed to be empowering came off as didactic. Moments meant to evoke fairy tale wonder were undercut by self-aware dialogue and abrupt thematic shifts. The result was a movie that felt unsure of its own identity, constantly tugged between honoring the past and rewriting it. But here's where it gets worse. The portrayal of the dwarves, the very issue that had ignited so much early controversy, ended up being one of the film's most glaring weak spots. In the final cut, their presence was noticeably altered, neither fully removed nor meaningfully reimagined. The characters appeared in a diminished, restructured form, as if the filmmakers couldn't settle on whether to feature them, minimize them, or reinvent them altogether. The indecision was palpable, and it added to the disjointed nature of the viewing experience. Rachel Zegler's performance became another lightning rod for debate. Some praised her for doing the best she could with a script that was clearly in flux, noting her charisma and vocal talent as bright spots amid the chaos. Others were far less kind, arguing she was miscast from the start and lacked the gravitas or warmth needed to carry such an iconic role. The inconsistency in her character's development, likely a byproduct of the script's multiple rewrites, only fueled the criticism, making it difficult to determine whether faults lay with the actress, the writing, or both. Meanwhile, Peter Dinklage remained conspicuously silent. His absence from the conversation led to widespread speculation that he was deliberately distancing himself from the production, perhaps wary of becoming further entangled in a controversy that had already taken on a life of its own. In contrast, Zegler couldn't escape the spotlight. As rumors of her private frustrations circulated, she endured a relentless wave of online scrutiny, with social media dissecting her every word, gesture, and expression for signs of regret or disapproval. Despite the months of buzz, both good and bad, the film failed to deliver the critical or commercial success Disney had hoped for. Social media lit up with discussions, memes, and debates, but ticket sales lagged, and the reviews offered little hope of a second wind. Hollywood insiders were quick to weigh in, many reinforcing the idea that too many competing voices and agendas had pulled the story in conflicting directions. What could have been a groundbreaking reinvention of a beloved classic instead became a cautionary tale about the dangers of overcorrection, muddled messaging, and the high cost of trying to please everyone. Not long after the film's underwhelming reception, new claims began to circulate. Disney was reportedly considering a second attempt at Snow White, this time with a clean slate. The whispers pointed to a quiet internal effort to reset the project entirely, with fresh writers, a new director, and a recast lead. While no official confirmation surfaced, the rumor alone was enough to reignite online speculation and fan discourse. For many, it was a clear acknowledgement that the original live-action attempt had missed the mark, and badly. By this point, much of the fan base had grown weary. What once generated excitement, Disney's ambitious campaign to reimagine its animated classics, was now being met with increasing skepticism. Viewers began to ask a hard question: was Disney's relentless drive to remake its legacy catalog doing more harm than good? The Snow White fiasco wasn't just another misstep, it felt like a warning sign, a breaking point in a formula that had once seemed untouchable. But this wasn't just any remake. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, released in 1937, wasn't merely a fan favorite, it was the cornerstone of Disney's animated empire, the studio's very first feature-length film, and a cultural touchstone that had shaped generations of storytelling. Tampering with such a foundational piece of Disney history brought with it a unique set of risks and expectations. Unlike remakes of more recent or less iconic films, reimagining Snow White meant walking a tightrope between reverence and reinvention. One misstep, and the entire endeavor could collapse under the weight of its own legacy. And collapse it did. If Peter Dinklage's critique was the match, then the studio's frantic response was the gasoline. In trying to course-correct mid-production, Disney appeared to sacrifice narrative clarity for damage control, leading to the fractured, inconsistent film that audiences ultimately received. What might have been a thoughtful modernization instead became a confused juggling act, one that never quite figured out how to honor the past while speaking to the present. The fallout from Snow White served as a stark reminder of just how precarious the process of modernizing beloved classics truly is. The intersection of legacy, cultural expectations, and evolving social norms is a minefield few studios can navigate cleanly. And when the first misstep involves the very film that started it all, the consequences reverberate far beyond a single box office disappointment. They cast doubt on the foundation of Disney's entire live-action strategy. Disney remained conspicuously tight-lipped as the dust settled. Despite the mounting speculation, insider leaks, and online finger-pointing, the studio offered no official comment on the alleged internal strife or the supposed blame games playing out behind the scenes. Instead, Disney appeared to adopt a strategy of quiet redirection, shifting its promotional energy toward upcoming projects, in the hope that fresh content would refocus public attention and wash away the lingering aftertaste of the Snow White fiasco. But if that was the plan, it didn't quite work. The rumor that Rachel Zegler had privately blamed Peter Dinklage for much of the chaos refused to fade. True or not, the idea caught fire in the public imagination. It added a layer of personal drama to what was already a high-profile studio misstep, turning a troubled production into a saga of conflicting ideals, misunderstood intentions, and backstage tension. The notion of two high-profile actors, each tied to important cultural conversations, caught in an unspoken feud, only deepened the fascination. But listen to this. When journalists attempted to get clarity by reaching out to Zegler or Dinklage, they were met with silence or carefully worded deflections. Neither star seemed eager to reopen the wounds or fan the flames. For Zegler, any confirmation of behind-the-scenes frustrations could risk further backlash or appear unprofessional. For Dinklage, weighing in after the film's failure might have looked like gloating, or worse, like taking credit for a collapse that extended far beyond his initial comments. From a strategic standpoint, Dinklage's supporters were quick to defend his role in the saga. To them, he had done exactly what many admired him for, using his platform to challenge outdated portrayals and call for more thoughtful, respectful representation in Hollywood. He was, in their eyes, a principled voice pushing the industry forward, not a saboteur of someone else's success. Meanwhile, from Zegler's alleged perspective, if she did in fact hold Dinklage responsible for setting off the chain reaction that led to the film's creative meltdown, it was likely a deeply personal frustration, one best kept behind closed doors rather than aired in headlines. After all, she had become the face of a film whose failure she did not single-handedly cause, yet bore the brunt of its collapse. In the end, the silence from both parties spoke volumes. It suggested a mutual understanding that the damage was done, and that no amount of commentary could untangle the web of creative miscalculations, cultural pressures, and clashing visions that ultimately doomed Disney's Snow White. As the dust settled, Snow White's troubled journey didn't simply fade into cinematic obscurity, it lived on as a cautionary tale, retold across message boards, fan forums, and casual conversations. The alleged behind-the-scenes rift between Rachel Zegler and Peter Dinklage became more than just gossip. It evolved into a symbol of the complex, often volatile terrain that studios now navigate when reimagining beloved stories in an era where every creative choice is subject to intense public scrutiny. The film's defenders, those who admired its ambition to modernize and elevate the classic, were often the first to admit that its execution had fallen short. Despite noble intentions, the story was stifled by a cacophony of creative voices, frequent rewrites, and corporate anxiety over how the public might perceive every detail. What emerged was a film torn between competing visions, one that sought to honor its origins while simultaneously distancing itself from them. In the end, it pleased no one completely. But the legacy extended beyond the screen. For Rachel Zegler, Snow White became an inescapable chapter of her early career, one marked not by triumph, but by controversy, intense public scrutiny, and a role that, fair or not, many would associate with a broader industry misstep. Though she had stepped into the project with promise and optimism, she walked away from it with a complicated legacy, a rising star caught in the crossfire of a cultural debate far bigger than any one performance. For Peter Dinklage, the saga served as both a reaffirmation and a reminder. His comments about the dwarf's portrayal, delivered with conviction and rooted in a long-standing call for better representation, reinforced his stature as a thoughtful and influential voice in Hollywood. Yet the aftermath also revealed how quickly a single statement, however well-intentioned, can spiral into widespread controversy, reshaping not just a film's direction, but the careers and reputations entangled within it. Ultimately, the Snow White debacle wasn't just about one film's failure. It was a snapshot of a shifting industry grappling with legacy, inclusivity, and the ever-tightening grip of public opinion. In trying to do everything right, the production exposed just how easy it is for even the most iconic stories to unravel under the weight of modern expectation. In the end, the Snow White disaster serves as a stark reminder that no amount of brand recognition, nostalgic goodwill, or legacy status can guarantee success. When a story is as iconic and culturally ingrained as Snow White, every creative decision is placed under a microscope, and any misstep is magnified 1,000-fold. What was once a symbol of Disney's golden beginnings became, in this case, a cautionary tale of how even the most revered properties can falter when vision and execution fall out of sync. The fiasco revealed a critical truth about modern filmmaking, that ambition must be matched by cohesion. It's not enough to reimagine a classic, there must be a unified, thoughtful approach that balances reverence for the source material with the demands and values of a contemporary audience. Without that clarity from the outset, even the best intentions can lead to a fractured, inconsistent final product. Whether or not Rachel Zegler truly blames Peter Dinklage, the controversy surrounding their alleged rift underscores just how delicate and complex creative collaboration has become in today's industry. In an era where a single comment can trigger studio-wide pivots, delay productions, or reshape entire narratives, the stakes are higher than ever. Not just for studios, but for the individuals caught in the spotlight. What may begin as a well-meaning critique or a push for representation can, without careful handling, morph into a flashpoint that derails the entire project. Ultimately, Snow White's downfall wasn't the result of a single bad decision, but a cascade of them, rooted in overcorrection, miscommunication, and a lack of unified vision. It stands as a case study in how not to modernize a classic, and a lesson for future adaptations. That legacy alone is not a shield, and progress without direction can just as easily lead to collapse.